Welcome to CS 201 IT for Managers, and this is your week one, and I'm your instructor, Clark. Um, we'll be talking about the application layer services for Module 1. And we can start off with the application layer, and in the application layer, we do have the DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol, and DNS, the domain name system, right? Um, application layer is the topmost of the protocol hierarchy. What hierarchy are we talking about? It's basically the OSI model, and we'll be discussing that I think in different module next in a different module. And just so you know, this is the oops, that's so big. The hierarchy, and we are in the application layer, which is at the very top. Right, it's the end user. When we say end user, it's basically us interacting, right, with let's say the web. Where network communication is initiated, uses services of the transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and the physical layer to receive and transfer data. Okay. Um, and just going back, an example of this one is you checking, Googling stuff, going to Facebook, and that is interacting with the application layer, right? We do have different types of mode for this application. We have peer-to-peer, where two processes are executing the same level and exchange data using shared resource. If you remember the days of torrent, that's peer-to-peer, where we, different computers or from different users are basically hosting the file, so that the resources for hosting that files are shared, right? The client server mode is different. This is the most of the time how we interact with things. Is basically we are the client, we access something, we request from the server, and if the server responds, right, and then we get the data back, right? So this is the form of like when we log into stuff, and the server says, okay, you're a valid user, gives me back the data, right? Um, in the application layer, there are many protocols there as well. Again, we have DNS, DHCP, the file transfer protocol, right? The HTTP when we type in our web address, SMTP, SNMTP. SMTP is like the mail protocol, and again, other network protocols, right? IP network configuration is very time consuming. The reason why is you can also do this manually. Hence, DHCP was developed to solve this, right? Because if you just have to manually assign IP, let's say for 10 computers, that's fine, right? If you have like a big enterprise, that would be a headache, right? DHCP server allows you to dynamically allocate reusable IP for IPv4 addresses. And the reason why we need IP address because the systems need an address to communicate from one another. It's kind of like when you're um, needing to go to somewhere to your friend, to your neighbor. You also need to have a sense of their address, right? To send something for them, let's say through mail. Okay, so this is the same thing for systems to communicate. They do need addresses. Okay, the HTTP client uses host server, returns configuration parameters. Okay, uses support 67 and 68. Again, just so you know, the lectures we're trying to shorten it out so that you guys don't feel very bored. And if you do have questions, I'm always available through MS Teams email. So this would be a better interaction for us. If I did not mention something that I do not feel that is important or is already defined, feel free to reach me out. Right. A client request. Right. Broadcast DHCP request asking any DHCP server. Right. To provide an IP address. Okay. The authorized server will receive the broadcast and then sends an IP. So let's see. And we do have this basic steps. We have discovery, offer, request, acknowledgement, right? And let's see, more words. Let's look for the graph, okay? And we can explain all of these through the graph, and you can just read this up. Um, let's look for a more simple graph than this one, so we're not confused. Okay, so let me just do a quick Google DHCP. I think it's Dora, right? Okay, this will be an easier image for us to consume for now. That is very small. And open image in the new tab. It's small. Make it just bigger. Okay, let's just do this. So again, the DHCP client would say, hey, number one, right? Can I request for an IP address? And server would say, okay, here's an IP address I'm offering you, right? And then the client would now select and say, I want this IP address. And the last thing that would happen is just, okay, server would say, okay, that IP address is yours. And here's a receipt, right? That I've given you this IP. So again, the receipt is, think of it like when you go to the restaurant, you have paid, but you don't know if you really have paid or not, and they give you a receipt of that transaction. So again, the client needs to have that acknowledgement. Why? If you don't have that, well, the DHCP client might keep on doing the DHCP request to say, oh, I want this. Have you received it? Not, oh, I want this. Have you received this? No acknowledgement is bad, right? Again, restaurant analogy, it's like when you have paid something and it's like, did you really finish the transaction or not? And the only way we would know it is if we get a receipt, again, either through paper or through electronically, right? Okay. Okay. Lease. So again, because IP addresses are just leased, there's a lease time, right? As like when you're renting, you do have a lease, right? It has an expiration, so you can get assigned to a different IP address. But most of the time, what it does is if no one's is really using or requesting that IP address, you can basically DHCP would basically renew you with the same IP address. Okay, iPod, skip this for now. So two commands in sequence. So you do have IP release and IP config renew, right? Again, this would differ a bit with Unix-based shell, which are Mac OS and Windows-based, right? But you can definitely try this out. It would not break your operating system, and you can see a lot of things there. Yep. Again, static IP address. So let's see if I do have that here as well. So let's see. Do I have IP network? Should be network. Let's see if I can grab something here. How about let's Google DHCP. There you go. So right now, if you're using Mac OS, cool. You can check out all the stuff here. You can manually do that. You can use using DHCP with manual address, which is defined in here, right? But most of the time, you just want to use this automatic. Okay. Let's move on. Domain name system. I think it's like the phone book of the internet. Machines or systems or the server can only understand again numbers or IP addresses, but for us humans we can't memorize those IP addresses, right? So it's better for us humans to say, oh, let's go to twitter.com, and then the DNS would resolve and give that specific IP address tied to that thing, and so that the server would know that you are trying to access this IP number, right? Again, an example would be Google. Google.com is 8.8.8, I think, and that's the equivalent IP address. I mean the numerical equivalent. Hierarchy. So we do have this hierarchy when we do access domains. We have country codes, generic. We can also quickly Google domain, I think model, domain URL. Okay, so this is a better example of an image like that. So if you happen to, let's say, use your mail google.com, the .com is the top level domain. The mail here is the subdomain, and the domain is Google. The path is everything after this one, right? And the protocol that you're using is the HTTPS, and for some unsecured is HTTP. Okay. Okay, we discussed that, so you can explore the cdu.edu as well. Host names, queries, port numbers. You don't really have to memorize. If you keep using them, you'll actually memorize, be stuck in your head basically. Uh, Internet host name. You can follow along this diagram. It's basically how it gets resolved. Caching. So caching is helpful so that it saves you that, let's say, domain and that IP address, so you don't have to keep asking the DNS to say, hey, can I have the address, right? If you have the cache, you can just check your cache and send that request right away. DNS zones. Okay. Zone transfer. Full zone transfer. These definitions are something that we can just read. Notify. Dynamic updates. That's about it. Again, for IT managers, I like the takeaway is how things work in a high level overview, right? And the application layer, think of you as a regular user, how you are basically interacting with the application layer. And once you understand that, that will be helpful to dig down deeper, right? So just know the basic stuff. Well, when you go hit the internet, what are you doing? What app? What layer is that one, right? What domain? How do you even get to that server? What happens, right? Um, how do machine knows when you put a address there? It basically changes to a number IP address, right? And so forth. So that is for um, this week's lecture. Again, anyone can ask. We can do additional lecture meetups, anything that can help you understand this better. So see you again.